Governments and parent groups are warning about the possible dangers of putting smartphones in the hands of children. Just how damaging can this technology be? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, when a mobile phone company warns parents against giving young children smartphones, you know the situation must be bad. In the UK, broadband firm EE is doing just that. And now there's a growing movement globally to keep such devices out of schools. In a moment, we'll hear from one mother about just how damaging smartphones can be for vulnerable children. But first, let's take a look at what's driving the backlash.
What is it?
Across Europe and other rich countries, this is getting to be a pretty common sight.
Mommy had this phone.
A toddler's face lighting up as she unboxes her new smartphone. But as internet-ready devices are increasingly ending up in children's hands, there's a growing backlash from parents who say their kids' screen time is harmful to young brains. And they're linking up with other parents in advanced countries to sign pledges not to buy their tweens a device. Governments and the mobile phone industry are sitting up and taking notice. And some jurisdictions are clamping down on mobile use in schools. Prior to being voted out in July, the UK's former Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said, "By removing mobile phones from the school day, we can create a safe space where pupils are protected."
Cell phones can become a really intense distraction. They have a cell phone, they really want to be on it all the time, and that can take away from the experience in the classroom. So I do think there should be stricter restrictions.
The UK government currently only has guidance over smartphone usage in schools. But many other European countries intend to, or have already disallowed its use, either partially or in full. These include Belgium, Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, Greece, Hungary and Italy. Almost all children in the UK aged 12 have their own device. Many psychologists report a plunge in teens' mental health starting around 2010 in rich countries, which coincides with when cell phones started being used widely. Some say the addiction to phones has rewired kids' brains and stolen their childhoods. As with so many other fields, policymakers are playing catch-up with big tech when it comes to the harms of smartphone use. Until then, how can children be better protected?
Miranda Miller is the mother of an autistic daughter who suffered extraordinary hardship after she was given a smartphone. Miranda now campaigns against their use in the UK schools. Let's listen to her experience.
My daughter was 10 years old. She had just been diagnosed with autism, and she was hassling me for months and months and months to get her an iPhone. She was saying, you know, all my friends are getting one. I'm not going to be part of the group. I won't be able to contact them. And I really held off. I got a gut feeling that it wasn't right. She was too young. She'd just been diagnosed with autism. I didn't really understand what autism was, and I didn't know the effects of it. And I just felt it was wrong. But then we went into lockdown, and I kind of changed my perspective on it. And I thought, well, this is a really good way for her to connect with her friends. It'll give her something to do. There's nothing to do, is there? So I succumbed to it. I got her an iPhone. I ordered it on the Friday, and I clearly remember that weekend before, as you know, as it was coming in the post, and how childlike she was, and how she played outside, and how she did activities. She painted, she baked, she was with the family, she was connected to us. And then the iPhone arrived on the Monday, and that was it. We lost her. We lost her, and she lost her childhood. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. That was all that she was interested in. She didn't want to do any of the activities of the kiddie stuff anymore. She just wanted to be on the phone. And one thing I really noticed as well, she didn't respect me anymore as a parent, because she could just look up on TikTok or Google and just say, "You're wrong, Mum. What you're saying is wrong." So I lost sort of like that respect as a parent. And you know, I put in boundaries. I did put in boundaries. I put in, you know, she would give it in at night. I'd set some time limits on it. I put locks on it, on certain apps, but it just crept in. And she pushed and she pushed, and because she's autistic, she would have meltdowns. She would get more and more sort of irate to try and get it, and it did just creep in. And I remember that sort of the last time I tried to take it off her at night, or just take it off her, she actually went away, and she seemed quite calm. And she went away and she came back and she said, "I've just taken loads of paracetamol." She took an overdose, and we ended up in A&E. And CAMS weren't any good. They couldn't offer me anything. And so I went home, and again I tried to take it off her, and she smashed the house up. And I rang social services and I said, "What do I do? What can I do about this?" And they said, "You need to wait for some help." But the help never came. And at the end of year 7, she gave up school. And her and that phone went into her room, and we completely lost her. And her mental health just got worse and worse, and she started self-harming, and she started becoming really suicidal, really depressed, so low, and it just got worse and worse, and to the point where she just stopped eating, and we had lost her, and I had to call an ambulance, and she ended up in hospital, where she has actually been. She's about to turn 15, and she's been in hospital for nearly a year. Due to her mental health. And I 100% blame iPhones. She wouldn't be in hospital now. She wouldn't be in this position if she hadn't had that iPhone. It drove her mad. You know, as adults, those notifications, that dopamine rush, it's really hard. It's really addictive to not pick up your phone all the time. But for a child, it's even worse. And that rush is so addictive. It's like heroin to them. And particularly for an autistic child who has no, you know, who gets obsessed with things and can't put it down, it absolutely destroys childhoods. And the government have a responsibility to step in and help us parents, help us to be able to manage our children and manage our children around smartphones. I truly believe that children should not have a smartphone until they're 16, and that we should go back to, you know, Nokias. If they need a phone to go out because they're on their own, give them a Nokia where they don't have that same those notifications and that dopamine rush. You know, the government have got a responsibility, and all the nurses on the wards where she is in hospital, they see it. They said you know, they've got 5 to 7 CAMS patients at one time with mental health problems that they've never seen before until smartphones came along. It is absolutely destroying our children, and we need help. We need the government to help us and to step in and bring our children back. Because what are we creating? What are these children going to become as adults? What is society going to be like? We need help. And I'm on a massive campaign to make sure that, you know, people sit up and listen, and that parents step in, parents stop giving their children phones as well, because that's part of it. If the children have it, then the other children have it, and they feel left out, so they get bullied for it. So it's a really vicious cycle as well. They need to be banned. Hey, we used to think smoking was good for pregnant women until we realised how bad it was for their health. And I truly believe we're in the same situation as this. It is killing our children and killing their mental health, and we need the government to change the legislation on it immediately.
Clare Fernyhough is the co-founder of the grassroots campaign group Smartphone Free Childhood. She joins us from Hampshire in the UK. Clare, good to see you. What advice would you give any parent having this conversation with a child right now about whether or not they should be getting a smartphone?
I think it's really important to frame it as, if you do decide to delay giving a smartphone, as we would recommend, that actually you're not taking away something from a child, you're giving them something. You're allowing them to preserve their childhood. Some people say, you know, the day you want to end your child's childhood is the day you give them a smartphone. You know, we see it as giving them something. Of course, it's difficult to be the odd one out, but often children don't know what they're signing up to. They like the idea of it, but they don't know how social media works. And we've had a lot of children in year 7 and 8 telling us that actually they wish they hadn't been given a smartphone, but at the time they didn't know what it was. So I think those things are really key to think about. But of course, just having that open dialogue with children so they can really express you know, how they feel about this. We don't want to be shutting it down. And also remembering that we're not anti-technology here. Children should be allowed access to laptops, iPads. You know, they can access WhatsApp and all of that sort of stuff on a computer, but it's just the issue is having that really powerful computer in their pocket 24 hours a day. And actually it stops them being able to focus and just enjoy their childhood.
Claire, a new government now in the United Kingdom. What would you say to the new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, on this? What would you like to see him do?
We would say that, look, you know, he's in his first 100 days. This is a perfect opportunity to really make an impact. You know, they're thinking a lot about mental health crisis that's affecting children and teenagers, but actually often they're not looking at the underlying cause. We think there needs to be very fast action on this issue. We think social media needs to be restricted to for under 16s, and we think there needs to be a child-safe phone. At the moment, adult devices, which is what they're using, are not appropriate for children. So we need to have a much safer phone. And also social media companies need to be not let off the hook. At the moment, they've got millions of underage users on their platforms. They're doing nothing to get rid of them. And they're not doing anything to kind of, you know, deal with the content that children are seeing. They could change the algorithm very easily. So there needs to be a lot more pressure on those platforms and those companies.
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Greystones in County Wicklow in Ireland is Rachel Harper. She is the principal at St Patrick's National School, where she implemented a voluntary code for phone use by students. In Eastbourne in the United Kingdom is Dr. Clare Stubbs. She's a psychologist and former youth worker. And here with me in the studio is Peter Ayton. He is a professor of decision research. That's at the University of Leeds. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Rachel, I'll come to you first. Just tell me about your voluntary ban, if you like, or how's it being implemented? How's it working?
Yeah, well, we as a group of principals in Greystones and Dalgany, 8 of us principals, we were very concerned about the increasing anxiety levels in Greystones and Dalgany. So we got together and we decided that we would roll out this voluntary code across our 8 schools, where we were asking parents to hold off entirely from buying their kids a smartphone until secondary school. So we've rolled it out. It's going really, really well. It's a year since we started it, and parents have taken really well to it. I think there was a sense of relief when the schools took the lead in this area. You know, parents were feeling already very overwhelmed. So they were glad to see this being brought in. And I think for the children themselves, there's a sense of fairness if everybody else is the same. You know, so it's worked really well.
Claire, just pick up on what Rachel is saying there. Do you think that's the way forward? I mean, a sense of relief from the parents that the school were making the decision for them?
Oh, yeah, massively. I can really understand why parents feel that sense of relief, because mobile phones are a source of, they can be a source of distraction and, you know, really detrimental to young people's mental well-being. And I think they can be a lifeline as well for young people who are going through really difficult stuff. So yeah, so my position is in the middle somewhere. And I guess in the absence of mobile phones, isn't it, how do we support those young people that feel like they are a lifeline during the school day?
Thanks, Claire. Peter, where do you stand on this? Ban them or have them limited or allow them?
So I don't normally sort of voice strong opinions about any issue, because I'm more interested in looking at, you know, what the evidence is and discussing that. I mean, in this particular case, I have a lot of sympathy for people who want to bring in a ban. I can see the reasons why they want to do it. I can see the benefits that would arise from it. And frankly, I struggle a little to see what the downside for such a move would be. So I'm sort of sympathetic to it. I'd like to hear why it isn't a good idea, but I can't see that for myself at the moment.
Well, let's ask Rachel. Rachel, I know teachers have a very, very busy day. They've a lot to be doing without policing who has or hasn't been using a mobile phone or a smartphone. What was the reaction from your pupils?
Well, again, I think there was a sense of fairness from the pupils. I think if you ask them if they'd like a smartphone, you know, quite honestly, they'd say yes. But I think they understand why now we're asking them to wait till secondary. So we were spending a bit of time talking to them why we were asking their parents to hold off until secondary before buying them a phone. And speaking to parents, you know, they were saying that their kids prior to the initiative were saying to them, look, I'm the only one in the class that doesn't have a smartphone. Please, can I get one? And parents felt under pressure because they didn't want their child to be the only one in the class without a smartphone or left out. So I think chatting to the children, there is, you know, they're accepting it more because everybody else is the same and it's uniformed, you know.
And Rachel, just tell me, how much disruption over the years have you seen in school? Because I've got teachers in the family and I hear stories about an incident happening in the playground, a WhatsApp being sent to a parent, a mother turning up the gates 10 minutes later. I mean, were you seeing those kind of incidents? I mean, information spreading out of the school before maybe even the principal knew what was going on?
We never allowed phones to come into the school, you know, so we weren't allowed. So I suppose with our initiative, it's making sure that the kids weren't using smartphones outside of school either, their own personal smartphones. But certainly, you know, as a group of principals, we could see the smart watches and things like that, exactly, that children were messaging their parents through the school day or, you know, messaging. So it absolutely is a distraction. Yeah, that's for sure. So it's taking any distraction away like that during the school day. I think it's really important.
Claire, that has to be a good thing, surely, doesn't it? I mean, it's difficult enough for teachers to be doing their job, getting children engaged in learning without people being on Snapchat or someone watching a video that someone has sent them in the room at the same time.
Totally. And I take my hat off to anyone who works in the school. And I guess I'm still working with young people, you know, sort of on the front line. And I'm hearing anxieties about if they don't feel understood in school or if they're going through like their own mental health difficulties already. And then where do they go to get support in the school day? Because I guess the parents are at the end of the phone. So like I say, if we're taking this away, then my concern is what's going to be put in place to ensure those young people are supported and that they've got somewhere where they can go.
And Claire, do you have any concerns about bullying as well? I mean, it's obviously something that has been in school playgrounds since time immemorial, but smartphones have made it next level in the last few years.
Oh, totally. Yeah, like I said at the start, isn't it? I know that a mobile phone is a source of destruction as much as it can be, you know, protective at the same time. So, yeah, it's both, isn't it? There's always two truths, I think. And therefore, it's so hard trying to navigate the ban and then what needs to be put in place, isn't it, as a result of taking it away. So, yeah, absolutely.
Peter, I'll come to you. I mean, if you look across Europe from Denmark, Greece, Italy, France, Ireland, this is a huge talking point. Many, many governments are looking to crack down on phone use completely in schools. Do you think we should be seeing perhaps more leadership in the UK at a political level on this?
Well, as I understand it, the last government, I mean, before they lost the election in the UK, were actually planning a ban on mobile phones, not just in schools, but to under 16-year-olds across the piece, regardless of whether they're in school or not. And, you know, for that government, that would have been a pretty big step, given, you know, their sort of normal attitudes as sort of total bans. You know, that's not something that comes naturally from them. I think what's leading this is, I mean, obviously the sort of opinions of professionals and people who are involved in the teaching of children are a really strong clue as to what's going on. But in order to inform policy, often politicians and skeptics generally will want harder evidence. And I think that's there. So there are studies, for example, showing that, if children are in school with a mobile phone, even when it's switched off in their pocket, they perform worse on assessment tests because they're kind of monitoring and thinking about the phone. Even when they're doing an exam, they're thinking, oh, I wonder if so-and-so has texted me, and I'll sort of switch my phone on afterwards. So studies that sort of really do away with the need for professional judgment, I think are pretty good evidence that, you know, resolve any disputes that there might be of a judgmental kind, because, you know, there are people who will say, oh, it doesn't have to be like that. There are children who say, oh, but I benefit enormously from being able to look things up in class while the teacher's talking and so on. And, you know, obviously a phone is a kind of complicated thing, and the effects of it and the uses of it are very various. There are probably good things to be had from them too. But it seems to me, looking at the evidence in the scientific literature, that there's a clear case that there's a detrimental effect on multiple aspects of child development, their education, their well-being, their social development, even such things as their memory and attention have been shown to be adversely affected by the use of mobile phones.
And tell me, Peter, do you think one solution might be to let children have maybe a dumb phone or, a brick, one of the old phones with just the numbers, they can make a call, that's it?
Yeah, I hear Claire talking about the need for certain children to have a sort of lifeline and have some means of being able to contact people out of school. I mean, obviously, that didn't happen when I was at school. I mean, you didn't go to school with I didn't have a mobile phone until I was, an adult, and even quite an elderly one at that. But yeah, I can see there might be a case for that, but maybe there's other ways of providing that lifeline without sort of equipping a child with a device which they can use autonomously, even if it is in a limited way, in all sorts of ways. They can send text to other people, perhaps. I don't know how we regulate that kind of thing, but I would want to see a strong case made for allowing a child to even have a sort of brick phone or a dumb phone. I'm not quite convinced that we want to allow even that.
Well, let's just look at some more statistics on this. According to the UK's telecommunications regulator, Ofcom, more than half of British children under the age of 13 use social media. And almost 3/4 of 13 to 17-year-olds in the UK have come across potentially damaging material or situations online. Rachel, I'll just come to you. Just tell me, do you think allowing younger children to have a dumb phone where they don't have the apps, they don't have Snapchat, they're not on WhatsApp, do you think that might be a solution, or would you just rather not have the phones in classrooms at all?
I think we'd just rather not have the phones in the classroom at all. But I suppose, Enda, a key point to all this would be educational, and that's where we feel really strongly. Education around the whole area of children learning how to maneuver, or young people, teenagers learning their way how to maneuver smartphones and social media. I think, it's so important that we teach them healthy habits from a very early age. It's much easier to keep and prevent a 7, 8, 9-year-old from getting a phone, right up to the age of 12, 13, what we're doing here in Ireland. But I think we have a sense of responsibility then to educate them, how to maneuver. We have to be realistic that these children are going into a world where it's very high tech. So I think it's really, really important to educate children, just like we're educating them about consent, sex ed, alcohol, drugs. We need to really educate them about using smartphones in a healthy way, some of the positive, uses for them and social media, but also, what to do when things go wrong. To go to an adult, to seek help and to give them those avenues what to do. And I think the earlier they learn that, the better for children and young people, and the better for their mental health. I suppose we want to create an environment where children can openly talk and ask questions, and that we can teach them, and teach them healthy habits. So I think that's really, really important.
Claire, Britain has a new Prime Minister now. Parliament is coming back in the next few weeks. Do you think Keir Starmer should be looking at this maybe and just doing more than the government offering guidance, actually coming out with legislation and saying blanket ban?
I think if there is a blanket ban, I totally agree with what everyone said here today. And like I say, I think if there's a blanket ban, there needs to be systems in place to support children when they're distressed, because often children look to go out elsewhere if there's not the support systems in the school. So if we're going to take something away, isn't it, what are we going to put in place to continue to support young people?
Rachel, final question to you. No regrets about what you've done?
Absolutely none. And again, we couldn't envision how quickly the children and the parents took to this. So I really do think that, sometimes we have to make these stands for, for the well-being and the best interests of the children. So absolutely no regrets.
So you keep going and that is it? Your school won't be seeing mobile phones used again?
Absolutely. The next stage for us, as we say, is rolling out, more education for the kids, preparing them, and also parenting classes and talks for parents, to try and prepare them for when their children get online. So that's the next stage for us here in Ireland.
Claire, I'll just come to you. Just one last point. Do you applaud what Rachel has implemented in her school? I mean, would you like to see that happen in English schools?
Oh, yeah, totally. I think it's amazing what they've done. And I'd like to talk to Rachel more about it. And yeah, like I say, isn't it? As long as it's put in place and there's safeguarding for those young people who are vulnerable and need support, then absolutely.
Claire, Rachel, Peter here with me in the studio, and Miranda for a very powerful personal testimony earlier on. Thank you all so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, please do hit the subscribe button. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.